The little girl was just playing with her older sister on the boat. Her father yelled and scolded her severely, saying, "Come here, you've done something wrong." He shouted at her and interacted with her harshly. The boy standing beside them witnessed this scene with great horror. He used all his strength to push the man down to the ground. Kia, afraid that her father might be hurt, quickly shoved the boy aside. At that moment, the wife also rushed over, concerned about her husband's condition, but unexpectedly the husband started interacting with her. The turmoil in the family continued late into the night. The little girl could only cover her ears to avoid everything. The next morning, while she was getting water, she heard the heavy sound of a door closing. She hurried to the door and saw her mother packing her things, preparing to leave. When she ran out of the room, her mother had disappeared. Although her mother never returned, the family interactions continued. Months later, the siblings gradually left the house. The last to leave was Jody. He wanted to take his younger sister with him, but was powerless as he hadn't even finished his own affairs, let alone take care of another person. Before leaving, he kept warning Kia, "You must be careful. If you find yourself in danger, hide deep in the swamp where the crayfish sing." From the lessons learned from her siblings, Kia learned how to live with her father. She tried to avoid him as much as possible. To protect herself, Kia never bothered him. She often went alone deep into the swamp where the trees were lush and green and small animals would often appear. She understood the survival rules of nature. One day she got lost in the swamp and encountered the boy who had once helped her. His name was Chase, and he was Jody's friend. Seeing Kia's situation, Chase said, "It's okay, I often get lost too." With Chase's company, she finally made it back home safely. The boy, full of sunshine, seemed to calm the tension in Kia's heart. There was something about Chase that made her feel emotions beyond just hurt for the first time. This gave her courage. For the first time, she went to her father and said, "I'm hungry." Perhaps feeling guilty about the family this time, her father wasn't angry. He took her to the store in town where he bought a bag of flour and some food. Juman and Ma Ben, the store owners, were a kind and gentle couple. Mrs. Ma Ben knew about Kia's family's situation, but she didn't openly reveal it. Instead, she gently advised Kia to go to school and secretly gave her a lollipop. After that, the little girl truly listened to Mrs. Ma Ben's advice and tried going to school. However, her classmates mocked her, calling her dirty and refusing to sit with her. That was also the last day she attended school. She felt that learning from nature was more important. For a while, it seemed that her father treated her quite well. He would take her fishing, and when he found out she liked feathers, he even gave her his military backpack. One day she received a letter from her mother, and the girl was very happy. But after reading it, her father burned the letter and told her that her mother would never return. That night, under her gaze, her father burned all of her mother's belongings. Then suddenly one day her father also left. Although it wasn't as painful as when her mother left, the loneliness was an empty feeling. After her father left, she had to face the struggle for survival. She didn't know how to live without flour. So at 4 a.m. the little girl could only cover her ears to avoid everything. She would go to the edge of the swamp to gather clams and bring them to town to sell to Juman and his wife in exchange for food and supplies for the boat. Mrs. Ma Ben knew about her situation, so she often gathered some donations from the church for her and even taught her simple calculations. Life continued like this until October 1969. Two boys were playing when they suddenly discovered a male corpse on the observation tower. After a thorough investigation, the police determined that the victim was Tate, a wealthy young man well known in town. The estimated time of death was around 2 a.m. Tate's body was found at the base of the fire tower, while the hatch on the rooftop was wide open. Therefore, the police speculated that Tate's death might have been an accident. However, they also found traces of Tate's blood and hair on the frame below the tower. Forensic examination revealed that the blow to the back of his head was the main cause of his death. The impact to the back of his head would have caused Tate to fall with his head downwards. However, this did not align with the crime scene. Therefore, it was possible that Tate had been pushed. Despite this, there were no fingerprints or footprints on the tower, and even the victim's fingerprints were absent. However, the police found a red fiber on Tate's jacket. Upon examination, this fiber was identified as wool, but it did not come from Tate's clothing. News of Tate's death quickly spread throughout the town, causing a stir among the residents. Due to the prevailing prejudices against the swamp girl, Kia became the prime suspect. With these doubts and biases, the police went to Kia's home. They found a red hat in the room, but no sign of Kia. The police deployed 2 speedboats and found the girl deep in the swamp. Frightened by the sight of him, she jumped into the water in an attempt to escape. But how could a small girl outrun the police? Eventually she was caught under the water and charged with murder. A few days later the court would proceed with prosecution. At that time an elderly man named Tom arrived at the prison. He was a retired lawyer well known in town and one of the few people who cared about Kia. He proactively offered to defend Kia in court as he didn't believe a kind-hearted girl like her could commit murder. However, having lived alone for many years, Kia showed no response to Tom's goodwill. Before leaving, Tom gave Kia a notebook about seashells. This notebook made Kia trust Tom. She finally let go of her guard and shared the specific reasons why her parents and siblings left and the painful experiences she had endured over the years. Since her father left, Kia had lived alone in the swamp. By 1962, Kia had found a feather beneath a large tree by the edge of the swamp. She was deeply drawn to the feather. Each day there were different feathers along with food placed by the tree. There were even a few pieces of paper with messages. Although Kia didn't understand the contents of the papers, she kept them with her. One day when Kia went to the base of the tree, she saw a handsome young man. It turned out that the person who had left the boat and the feathers was Tate. He knew that Kia liked birds and their feathers, so he often came here. Kia told him that she couldn't read and couldn't understand the notes he had left. "Oh, I just mentioned that I had seen you a few times while fishing. I thought you might need some seeds and a lighter. I have extra so you don't need to go to town. I thought you would like these feathers." After that, Tate took the initiative to teach Kia to read. After all, Kia had known Tate since she was little and their relationship quickly grew closer. Although Kia enjoyed being alone, she still had childhood memories of Tate, so she invited Tate to her house to read books. On the walls of Kia's house, there were many paintings of different animals, each one drawn with great vibrancy. It seemed that in Kia's world these paintings had a certain life to them. Tate couldn't help but be amazed. During the days of reading together, Kia progressed very quickly, from simple words to sentences, then to grammar and adjectives, which were quite difficult. Kia was able to memorize them remarkably well. Soon they had finished all the books about creatures in the library. 3 times a week from summer to fall, they studied all the plants and animals, how they adapted to the changes of the earth over time. As time passed quickly, their relationship became more and more intimate. Not long after Tate's father found out about it. "Is she your girlfriend?" "She's my friend. I bring her books because people don't treat her well. She can't go to school and doesn't have a family." He didn't demand his son to obey him, but he asked Tate never to end up like him, always just a seafood dock worker. He reminded Tate not to forget his dream of going to college. The fragmented memories were interrupted by the trial. Kia was charged with first-degree murder. The victim's family demanded the harshest punishment for Kia. Tom told Kia that she had a choice called a plea bargain. If Kia was willing to plead guilty, she would be sentenced to 10 years in prison but could be released on parole after 6 years. If she insisted on going to trial, the result would either be a life sentence or immediate release in court. Kia firmly refused the first option. No matter the cost, she didn't want to spend the rest of her life in prison. The second trial quickly began. The prosecutor accused Kia of pushing Tate off the fire tower sometime between midnight and 2 a.m. on October 30th, then covering up her footprints and fingerprints. Kia's defense attorney also argued that Kia had personality traits that could have led to the killing of Tate. Seeing Kia appear anxious, Tom handed her a piece of paper with the words, "Don't panic." Tom was very cautious about the case. He argued sharply, presenting multiple scenarios and objective assessments from the townspeople. In the face of Tom's eloquent words, Kia's anxious heart began to calm down. At the same time, her memories returned to 1962. It was a sunny morning and Tate and Kia were talking by the tree. That day she saw Tate talking to his father. Kia felt that Tate's father was very kind and wanted to know more about Tate's family. Tate hesitated a little but eventually told Kia, "On my birthday, my mother and sister went out to buy me a birthday fruit. Unfortunately, they had an accident on the way. I'll never forget that sad past." Just as Kia was comforting Tate, a gust of wind blew by, causing the nearby leaves to rustle. It seemed that swept along by the wind, they both gently swayed together. The atmosphere became warm and wonderful. Kia's gentle gaze also made Tate's heart flutter. From that day on, Tate and Kia became a real couple. On Kia's birthday, Tate brought her a small cake. Kia saw it and was deeply moved. It seemed that all this time she had forgotten her own life, but now she was with the person she loved. Kia felt this was the happiest moment of her life. However, this was just the beginning. Along with the sound of birdsong, a flock of snow geese migrated here and landed right in front of the lovers. Unable to hold back their emotions, they embraced each other. Time passed from autumn to winter and then to spring with one constant in nature change. Tate finally received his university acceptance letter. They both had to face the inevitability of separation. Although very sad, she still hugged Tate and spent their last night together. Before he left, Tate gave her a list of publishers he hoped she could send her paintings and notes to. At least she could earn some royalties. While she wouldn't become rich, she wouldn't have to dig for clams to survive anymore. In the days Tate was absent, she returned to her solitary life. She looked forward to Tate's return every day. Finally, Independence Day arrived. She found her prettiest dress and did her makeup, arriving early at the beach to wait for him. But after a whole day and night, Tate did not appear. Heartbroken, she cried bitterly on the beach. Finally, she understood something. Tate, life and love were all the same. They all left her, but whenever she fell, the swamp would lift her up. At some point, sadness would gradually fade. Like water sinking into the sand, it wouldn't disappear, but would sink deep into the earth. Back in court, the prosecutor argued that there were no footprints or fingerprints around the victim and the fire tower. Even on the open trapdoor, there were none. Clearly, someone had deliberately wiped away all traces. Tom presented the tide chart from the early morning of that day. According to the tide chart, footprints could have been washed away by the tide. The absence of footprints could not prove she committed the crime. Tom also introduced a report from the Forestry Department. As early as last July, the Forestry Department had discovered the trapdoor was very dangerous and had sent a notice requesting the town to make repairs. However, the town had delayed and failed to do so. In response to Tom's sharp words, Kia also expressed her agreement. At the same time, her thoughts drifted back to 1968. That day when she returned from the beach, she discovered a man taking photographs in front of her house. She hurriedly sought out Juman and Ma Ben and learned that the man was an employee of a real estate developer. They had been surveying the swamp for weeks and wanted to drain it to build a resort. But her family had been gone for many years and she wasn't sure if the house still belonged to her. Ma Ben told her that she needed to find the land papers to prove the house was hers. As she left the store, she encountered Tate, the son of a wealthy family in town. He invited her to go on a boat picnic with him on Sunday. After thinking for a moment, she agreed. She then went to the land office. After checking all the documents related to the house, everything was in order, but she still needed to pay an additional $800 in taxes. When she returned home, Kia found the notes that Tate had left behind. After 5 years, she finally followed this path. She sent her manuscript samples to various publishers. The next day, she attended Chase's picnic. After the meal, they sat by the beach and Chase picked up a red seashell from the ground. She immediately named the shell along with its origin and living habits. However, Chase's mind wasn't on the shell. He gave her the shell as a gift and complimented her, saying she was very special. He then kissed her. Just as he was about to go further, she suddenly pushed him away. "I know you think I'm cheap, but I'm not something that can be bought with a picnic meal." "No, I'm sorry, I don't think you're cheap." Seeing her reaction, Chase also apologized for his forwardness. To make it up to her, he took her to his secret base, the fire tower, that had long been abandoned. Although she was familiar with the swamp area, standing on the fire tower left her in awe. It felt as though this was an old friend she hadn't seen in a long time, but she couldn't recall what they looked like. Later, Chase suggested they go to her house. Although she wasn't ready, he insisted. As soon as they stepped into her house, she saw the walls covered with paintings. It was clear that Chase didn't care much about them, but he still confessed to her. "I think you're amazing. Really, you're as free as the wind and incredibly smart. I won't push you to do anything anymore." How about that? Perhaps because she had been lonely for so long, she forgave Chase's unreasonable behavior and agreed to date him. She wasn't sure about her feelings for Chase, but at least she no longer felt alone. One morning, she saw Chase's friends in town, but didn't approach them. Instead, during one of their dates, she wanted to talk about her friends. But Chase replied that he didn't have many friends and wasn't sure if anyone truly understood him. Not long after, Kia finally received a response from the publisher. They were eager to collaborate with her. Kia shared this good news with Chase, and they went to the beach to celebrate. Kia even made a necklace for Chase out of the seashell he had picked up on the beach, attaching it to a piece of raw leather and tying it. Chase wore it constantly. Now Chase was dead, but the necklace had disappeared. Chase's mother believed that the killer had taken the necklace and that the killer was certainly Kia. This was because not long before, Chase had told his mother that he and Kia had broken up. She believed that Kia had intentionally killed him because she couldn't have him. Tom immediately objected, as the police had thoroughly searched Kia's house but had not found the necklace that Chase's mother mentioned. The story then shifts back to 1969, 6 years later, when Tate finally returned, after finishing his